Brexit, a heavy issue in the UK, a large conflict between politicians all around the world, and somewhat of a mystery to us in the Western Hemisphere who don't know much about the tangle of European politics.
So today, we will explore this topic, its history, its present, and its possible effects on the UK and the world.
So let's start from the beginning. In late 1993, the European Union, or the EU, was founded. The EU essentially is a pseudo-government alliance for countries on the continent of Europe. It sets regulations on European products, holds European countries accountable for various political and economic actions, and fosters collaboration on a variety of projects, from economic development to technological innovation.
In June of 2016, the UK held a referendum vote on whether or not to leave the European Union. England and Wales both voted majority in favor of leaving, but Northern Ireland and Scotland voted majority in favor of staying. Overall, the majority was in favor of leaving the EU.
The reasoning for this is multifaceted. First and foremost, immigration was a huge issue for the people of the UK. People within the European Union are allowed freedom of movement, meaning, for example, French nationals could easily migrate to the UK for job opportunities and vice versa. But the UK is a vital source of jobs in Europe due to their large economy. So, there were many migrants from across Europe coming to the UK. Many were concerned that this would put a strain on the job market in the UK and take jobs away from UK citizens. A number of politicians were also opposed to the economic restrictions placed on the UK by the European Union. They argued that the product and tariff regulations were harmful to Britain's consumer and businesses.
Since the 2016 referendum, the EU and the UK have been drafting up plans to make Britain's exit from the EU as smoothly as possible, but to no avail. No one really knows what's going to happen with or without a deal, but the EU has been pushing a deal mainly to protect the greater European economy from a hypothetical crisis after the UK's exit.
The process goes like this. First, the British Prime Minister has to sit down with EU officials to draft up a plan. Then, that plan goes back to the UK, and Parliament votes on every single aspect of that plan. Even before we add in Parliament's partisan gridlock and the political mess surrounding Brexit, this process sounds incredibly tedious. This is where the political situation gets a little bit sticky, and having a basic knowledge of UK politics can help to clear it up. UK's Parliament has several different parties, but the main two are the Conservatives, or Tories, and the Labour Party.
The Conservative Party, in the context of this issue, is in favor of a hard Brexit. What does that mean? Well, the party believes that the EU has far too much power over the UK as it is. Transferring EU law into UK law would help mitigate that issue a bit. Give the UK government more power over its own country, rather than some disconnected European fools over in Brussels. A no-deal situation is not ideal, but it is sure as hell is better than a deal that continues to harm the UK. The Labour Party, with regard to Brexit, is in favour of a soft Brexit to protect the economy and the average UK worker from the possible detriment caused by a complete cut-off from the European Union and its economic institutions. Of course, many European Union institutions are disconnected and far away from issues in the UK, but bringing these institutions, or at least the same concepts, closer to the communities they affect the most is far better for the workers of the UK than completely abandoning them. Overall, no deal simply is not an option. There is no telling the harms it might have on those in the working class.
There are other parties with members of Parliament, such as Sinn Féin, Liberal Democrats, Plaid Cymru, Scottish National Party, and Democratic Unionist Party. Of these few parties, few supported Brexit in the first place. Apart from the Democratic Unionist Party, a more conservative party from Northern Ireland. Parties like Sinn Féin, Plaid Cymru, and the Scottish Nationalist Party largely support nationalist movements in Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, respectively, and thus oppose Brexit simply because they see it as a British issue and not an Irish, Welsh, or Scottish issue. This weird web of politics was further complicated by Theresa May's resignation as Prime Minister and as the leader of the Conservative Party in early June.
I resigned because I felt after 3 failed attempts to deliver Brexit, the position of Prime Minister might be better suited to someone else, with other ideas and other ways of dealing with Parliament. Someone who is perhaps a more unifying force to Parliament than myself.
And now Boris Johnson, the controversial former mayor of London, is now Prime Minister of the UK. He assumed office on July 24th, 2019. He is particularly adamant that he will move forward with Brexit on its next deadline, October 31st, whether or not Parliament is able to strike a deal.
I will make it a priority to leave the European Union. Obviously, no deal is not something anyone wants. Really, I don't believe that we will leave without a deal anyway. But should we have to forgo a deal in order to swiftly get our country out of the grips of the European Union, then that is what we must do.
So now, the main question is, what's going to happen? There are a few possibilities. First, there is obviously the no-deal option. It is unclear how exactly this will affect the UK and the EU's economy, but many have made plausible speculations. Travelers' health insurance for UK citizens might go up, the value of the pound might fluctuate, and trade with the EU member states may prove to be more difficult. But these things could also not happen. There is also the possibility that Parliament might agree on a deal. This seems more unlikely as there is a new Prime Minister who is quite polarizing in the UK, and less than 3 months before the October deadline. Nevertheless, if a deal does get through Parliament, chances are it will be a more conservative-leaning deal, meaning more of a hard Brexit. Whether or not this is a good or bad thing depends on your own perspective. A deal would most likely soften the economic effects and political panic in the UK, but then again, these effects are all theoretical. No one knows for sure what's actually going to happen.
And here is where we reach the end, or at least look into the future. Brexit is a huge issue in the UK because it not only scrambled up many feelings about international relations within the UK, but also it brought up a very hypothetical and unsure feeling about UK politics. Scotland even threatened to leave the UK over this one single issue. But it's not really just a single issue, is it? It's a tangle of economics, politics, society, and global status. So can you blame a Scottish voter for not wanting to risk the well-being of their communities for a vote that they didn't agree with? Can you really blame an English voter for thinking that their community might sink into deeper water if the UK doesn't leave the EU? So whether or not the UK's economy will thrive, whether or not it will go downhill, or whether or not the world as we know it will go down in flames because of a simple, singular change in European relations, will all be determined soon. Regardless of your political beliefs, you can expect much economic concern and political tension in the coming months. Oh, okay, now they're not. They were just staring at each other.
I'm a horse.
Is going to happen with or without a deal, but the EU has been pushing a deal mainly to protect the greater European economy from
I know, I was like laughing at that.
The reasoning for this is multifaceted. The reasoning for this is multifaceted. The reason... Darn it. Excuse me, the first line. Stop smiling.
Okay, I'm just gonna look down.
Was further complicated.
We should just show her like crumbling down to the floor. He assumed Amish. That's what I was gonna say.
He assumed Amish. I'm right. And then it goes, wee. Is this filming?
No. Parliament. Someone who is perhaps a more unifying force in Parliament than myself.
Parliament. There's no R.
Parliament.
Pretend there's no R there.
Well, the party believes that the EU...
Do you want me to make you cards? I want a sequel. 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 I want a sequel.